Good day, everyone. This is Lenny Esposito coming to you with Come Reason Ministries and the Come Let Us Reason podcast. Just wanted to think about this week a controversial new video that's been making the rounds recently. Jordon B. Peterson is a figure known by many people, especially across the internet. Became very famous for, first of all, taking a stand at the University of Toronto against using preferred pronouns from some of the students who had pushed for that there. And then secondly, in his defense of his position against a Sky 4 interview, British journalist Kathy Newman, who kind of sparred with him, and he held his own. But beyond that, Peterson has really made his name in things like his books, and a lot of young men especially are gravitating towards the message he's offering, which is a kind of a tough love message. That's what Peterson works in. What's interesting is that we're seeing now a lot of Christians who are gravitating towards Peterson and his message, even though Peterson himself isn't a Christian. Now, he has in the past talked about the mythos of Genesis and some of these things. But the video we're interested in today is the video that he put out entitled Message to Christian Churches. And it's a fascinating thing. Here is a non-believer basically approaching Christian churches and telling us what he believes we should be engaging in, or maybe I should better say, here's a non-Christian who's engaging the Christian church, showing that there's a opportunity here to reach out to young men and giving the church advice on its mission and how it should go forward in capturing this subset of society. He feels that it is an important aspect of retaining our society. He doesn't say so, but I believe Peterson thinks that the churches are one of the last best hopes for countering some of the cultural craziness that's going on in our society today. So what should we do? Should we accept these ideas? Should we understand them better? I think it deserves a closer look and a little bit of analysis. And we'll be dealing with that on this section of Come Let Us Reason Together. Good morning, everyone. As I said, we're in another episode of Come Let Us Reason Together, and my good friend Dominic is joining me for this session. Hi, Dom. How are you?
Doing good, Lenny. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
It's always a good time speaking, and I think this is going to be a pretty interesting topic, especially as Jordon Peterson really is someone who's made a lot of headway, especially in Christian churches. I know a lot of people have very differing views on some of his ideas. Some are frustrated by them. Some are Peterson fans. They just believe that, everything he offers is really a good selling point. And some just don't know what to make of the whole thing. This video, I think, specifically is hugely interesting in that he specifically addresses Christian churches. And he says right at the top, it's completely presumptuous of me to dare to write and broadcast a video entitled Message to Christian Churches, but I'm going to do it anyway. I understand it. He is primarily concerned about the moral and social decay in our society. I think that's what he's trying to address in this video, and I think he realizes, at least fundamentally, that church, that faith, is one of the foundational elements that holds society together. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to have churches re-engage young men in its calling, because of all aspects of society, Peterson really makes the argument that young men are targeted the most. They're criticized the most. They are the ones who receive the most complaint, I want to be careful and not put too many words in his mouth, but he does in his video go off to talk about how young boys are castigated by the toys and the violence and things like that, things that Christina Hoff Sommers would say is the feminization of our society, where we really want to see more girl feminine behavior as opposed to aggressive masculine behavior. So we need to I think, understand a lot of this and unpack a lot of it. Can you tell me, Dom, you got to watch the video. What did you think was your approach or was your initial understanding or
my take, Lenny, from it was, regardless of whether he's a believer or not, I don't know. The Lord knows his state, and he may, profess to be one thing and be another. He seems like a real genuine individual. I really gravitate towards a lot of what he says. It rings true to me. There's a natural aspect that I think is probably rings true to everybody, and what we end up doing is somehow suppressing some of that truth. Those observations can be made by anybody, regardless of whether they're Christians or not. My take from his video is, I welcome the critique, regardless of the source, as long as it's an accurate critique. If it accurately depicts the way the church is actually being, and it should be another way, then I welcome it. As far as the answer to those critiques, maintain a grounded Christian worldview. So if the response to those critiques are grounded in a Christian worldview, I'm okay with it.
So
what is the response?
So there's two aspects that you're saying. First of all, there's the critique, and then there's the response. How do we fix perhaps what's going on? And I would say, first of all, I don't think his critique is primarily, I don't think his message is primarily a critique. I think what he's trying to do is tell the church there's a blind spot in what you're doing, in the fact that you're not reaching out to a segment of society that you can, or if you are reaching out, you're maybe not understanding it well. You're not understanding how to get to these young men. And Peterson is saying, my career, even when I did my 15-part series on Genesis from a philosophical standpoint, mythosociological standpoint, however you want to phrase it, it attracted tons of young men. And young men need to be engaged. We need to call them out specifically, because they are one of the most foundational and powerful forces the world has ever seen, right? If you want to move the world, you engage young men, because that's where our armies come from. If you have passionate young people, they can create a whole new movement in society. So he's saying, you need to specifically look at these guys, and then you need to approach them in a certain way. You need to approach them as, tell them what to do, right? He says in the video, you got to put the sign out there. Here's how you dress when you come to church. Here's when you show up. Here's what we are going to expect from you, that kind of thing. So those kinds of ideas, he's almost trying to teach us in a way that he says, well, this is the success that I have found, and this is how you can engage as well. Because if we don't, the other side is going to win. The other side being, the critical social justice movement, the broader politically left ideology, or I should say maybe the progressive ideology, which becomes subjective in its moral understanding, subjective in its really understanding of reality, right? We have, transgender issues and things of that nature. All of those things, all of those things combine in that regard. So that's what I think he's trying to communicate. I'm hesitant on a couple of things because I think some of the things he gets aren't quite accurate. And the first question is, has the church failed young men? I think that's what we gotta. That's his premise. We have to start there. Is the church not beckoning young men? And I think that's a yes and no question. So I think that the church has sought in the past to do things like Promise Keepers and movements like that. Back in the 80s and 90s, remember they had the Power Team. Remember that whole shtick? But see, that to me that is more hype and marketing than it is actual ministry. I think people want reality and they want to be put to use and shown that what they're engaging in is real as opposed to just the show. And so I think, but it's not that we're not thinking about this. I know every pastor that I've ever talked to said, hey, I'd love to have young men in my congregation. So they are looking for this answer in some way, shape, or form. They're looking for some answer anyway.
Lenny, if I may, I'd like to jump in here, regardless of however you phrase it, whether you view it a critique or just an observation. In my view, it's a critique based on an observation, right? He sees the church, he sees in his line of work, his job is, I don't know if he's a psychologist but he's making observations on young men, like you mentioned earlier, and the void that exists in the church to meet those needs of young men. So he's presuming that young men have some sort of nature that is natural to who they are, and there's things missing in the church that aren't meeting those needs. Now, those observations, and I can foresee some would probably, that are opposed to psychology and things of that nature, would probably balk at this statement, but a psychologist, in essence, if they're observing what is natural to an individual, like let's say a man, and what comes natural to them as far as masculinity and things that are attributed to masculinity, he's seeing those observations. Those are just observations. Those are truths that can be ascertained by anybody, Christian or non, right? So these observations, like science, in the same way, you're making these observations and you're concluding things based off of these observations. So within the church community, if there are some who are balking at the idea of his position as a psychologist, or these are just observations that can be made. You don't have to have the label of a psychologist or anything else. Anyone can see on its face that, in my view, we have been short on this as far as if we should be monitoring or getting a good idea of what it means to be a man, if there is a biblical description of manhood, and we're not meeting those needs, and I can understand why we may not be meeting those needs, right? Generally speaking, the church responds to situations, and culturally, what happens is that the church is responding to different casualties that folks come in suffering the consequences of the world's philosophies, right? So, and those world's philosophies, and for the most part, are harmful views, right? So, to give you an example, so you have the whole sex concept, right? It's free for all with no responsibilities. Young girl falls for the lie, gets pregnant. Fortunately, in some cases, keeps the baby, right? But now she's raising this baby by herself, right? And so the Lord works in her life. She comes to the church, and now the church is packed with, generally speaking, a predominantly female crowd. And over time, we've been able to see via surveys that the predominant attendants of the church have been female, and those who serving the church have been female. So I think it logically follows if the predominant voice in the church is female, then the direction that the church is going to go, they're going to meet the female needs more so than the male needs, right? And males are a little different from what I've observed and in my own self. Males, generally speaking, try to be self-sufficient. They try to just get it done. The mindset is totally different. And so they don't really seem and feel like they need to voice anything. It's like, no, I'm going to grin and bear it, and we'll take care of it. We'll make it work. So there is no voice appealing to the need to meet these voids, if you will, within the church. So the church is kind of imbalanced, as it were, right? So now it's like we're meeting the needs of the female side, which is good and appropriate, but we're not balancing it out and meeting the needs of the male side. And the male side isn't helping itself by not voicing anything. So now here steps in the gentleman, making those observations and saying, hey, this is a big void that I'm seeing. And as a person who attends church, and I have a great church, but it's not an easy task to maintain that balance. And I can see it's not that people are doing it with an intent behind it. It's just kind of a subconscious direction that they go based off of what is being asked of them. So in my view, I can see why we got here and how we got here and how the church is not balanced in that direction, and kind of not being able to maintain those folks who, number one, haven't been coming to church because they feel there's nothing there for them, and they're not going to voice their opinion and say you need X, Y, and Z. For the most part, generally speaking, the church has been kind of negligent with regards to male needs, and oftentimes even if the church provides them, sometimes as men we feel like, nah, I need to handle this myself. I know that I struggle that all the time, where I feel like, no, this is something that
there's a reason why men never go to the doctor or never ask for directions, right? They're we want to be more self-sufficient because it somehow is an imputation on our masculinity if we have to ask for help, and maybe we don't say it that way. No, but I mean, that's it's kind of an age-old conundrum. But I hear what you're saying. So let me go back and talk about a couple of things. First of all, I think there's some things that he does get right. I think number one, as of especially from the 90s forward, but today it's more explicit that there is a dearth of support for just the masculine mindset, and this starts in schools. Folks have noted that if you're a teacher, what you don't want is a whole bunch of active boys. Remember the Ritalin craze, and everybody was ADHD, and it was a way that teachers kind of overcompensated for kids who just had a lot of adrenaline, sometimes a little bit of testosterone, and wanted to be active in the way they approach life. And so they were jumping up and down, where girls, by and large, I know we're talking in sweeping generalities, but by and large, girls would be more complacent. And there was a feminization of approach to education where it's just easier if you have 30 students to have them all sit down and be quiet. Now, I push back a little bit against that because I know that the schoolmaster in the 1880s or 1870s got strict attention from his students. I also know that the drill sergeant, taking these 18-year-old boys from really tough walks of life, can get strict attention from his soldiers. So discipline can help that, but discipline is something different in today's schooling than it was then. Back then, they pulled out the ruler. It was a quick, sharp rebuke, and then we moved on to the next thing, as opposed to, well, you're a problem child, we need to medicate you, or we need to calm you down, that kind of thing. But
does it surprise you now that why we're so sensitive as a culture?
It's part of it, definitely. So there is that aspect, and he also notes that that one of the things that's going on is what he calls, and this is around the 3-minute mark, he says, there's an inculcation of an extremely damaging ideology, which essentially consists of 3 accusations. So he breaks this down into 3 accusations. Number 1, humor culture, particularly in the West, is best construed as an oppressive patriarchy motivated by the desire, willingness, and ability to use power defined as the compulsion of others against their will to attain what are purely selfish and self-serving ends. And so he's talking about really a lot of the social justice idea where people are derided or labeled as oppressive because they have power and I don't, or they have money and I don't, or things like that. He says exploitation of political disagreements to war, business arrangements, deception, and theft. He says it's true of not only the current social arrangements that characterize our culture, particularly in the West, but also fundamental reality of history. So this has been going on forever. It's always the oppressed versus the oppressor. Basically, if you have something that I don't, oh, you're oppressing me, and this is what Marx leveraged in the rise of the rise of the proletariat to overthrow the bourgeoisie. The second accusation he notes is that human activity is despoiling the planet. And he says that what he uses the term a Malthusian catastrophe, basically overpopulation, biosphere degradation, that we have placed extreme limits on our wants, even our needs, so that the survival itself can be guaranteed, but it'll be in a much reduced form. He thinks that that's an accusation that needs to be bolstered. And his last one is that the prime contributor to both the tyranny that makes up the oppressive patriarchy and the structures of all our social interactions, as well as the despoiling of our beloved Mother Earth, is damnable male ambition, competitive and dominating power, mad, selfish, exploitative, raping, and pillaging. So he's saying that they're putting the blame for oppression as well as cultural disaster primarily on men, on the patriarchy. That's what he's saying is one of the objectives here. It's easy to say that. I think that there are a lot of folks today in critical social justice and other things that will point to women as much as men in terms of just being white and things like that. But this is one of the aspects that he's saying that men feel and therefore want to push against, or conversely, they check out. They say, what's the point? If all I'm going to do is to be derided anyway, I might as well just stay in my mom's basement and play video games. So that is, I think those are in some ways a fair assessment of the way young men may be feeling. And then he says, so the church can give your life true meaning. It can call you to reach out beyond yourself. One of the things that the church does, at least the Christian church, if it's teaching Jesus' commands faithfully, is to say that you need to be about something other than yourself. You need to focus on others first and put yourself aside. And this, again, was one of the primary cores of Peterson's message. He was always talking about, if you want the 9 rules for life, get up, make your bed in the morning, right? This is what you do. Take responsibility for who you are. Life is hard. Don't expect that you're going to be having an easy ride. It's funny how the default position today seems to be, a lot of people think on all sides of the spectrum, think that the default position is to be happy, is to have fun, is to have a good life. And then every once in a while, there'll be a tragedy that we have to overcome. And that's actually backwards. That most of humanity, life has been tragic, difficult. You're not guaranteed 3 meals a day, right? You're pushing to exist and subsist on whatever limitations you have around you. But every once in a while, if the harvest is good, if the grain comes in, you can take a breath. You can go to the county fair. You can enjoy a day with your family, and those things were of value. But there was the struggle that was important. And in this, I find it interesting that even my children and myself differ. Now, my boys are pretty much grown. When I was a young man, when I was 12, 13, 15, I looked forward to the day that I could deal with my own problems. I wanted to pay my own bills. I wanted to tackle the struggle of what it means to be living by myself, including, oh my gosh, these are tough issues that I'm going to have to figure out. There's not enough money at the end of the month, things like that. Those were the things that I actually looked forward to because I understood that dealing with the difficulties of life is part of what it means to come into your own maturity. And that's really what maturity is when you understand your commitments, what's the word I'm looking for? That your responsibilities supersede your fun.
Your duties.
Yeah, your duties, your responsibilities are primary, and your enjoyments fall into secondary. Today, I see it opposite. I see a lot, even in my kids, they say, "Oh, I got to do the adulting now. I got to stop being with my friends, and I got to take care of these bills, or I've got to take care of this stuff." And even that word adulting has always bothered me because why don't you want to be an adult? Why is that?
Right.
Why is that a problem? That shouldn't be a problem. That should be a good thing. But they say it with such disdain or such resignation that you have to say, why do you think life should be easy? Why is that your default position? What it means is that life has been easy. It means that you've come, we throw around the word privilege. Privilege is really what we see in our 21st century. Well, you're living the life today of privilege. Even 100 years ago, once you start hitting the Depression and things like that, it was brutal. It was tough. And so this is all part of what I call this arrogant nature of affluence, right? We have the arrogance of affluence. We think that because we've had it easy, that's the way life should be. And of course, parents in the last 50 years haven't helped things by wanting so much to be not only friends with their kids as opposed to authoritarians, but also by bailing their kids out of the scrapes that they got in, so kids never learned how to fail. So, the old comic strip where in 1960, the parents are meeting with a teacher and their child, and they're holding up this F, right, on the report card. And in 1960, it's the parent screaming at the child with the teacher looking on. And in 2000, it's the parent screaming at the teacher with the child looking on. Why did my child get an F? I know. So who do you blame? Do you blame the kid or do you blame the teacher? And that seems to be something that's changed within the last 2 generations. So I think all of that is true.
I think the absence of virtue and values, it's hard enough, right? We're trying to grow up. I didn't grow up with my mom or my dad. They established some values and some virtues, which were super helpful, and I appreciate those. But I didn't grow up with a long list of virtues and values on, hey, this is the blueprint on how to be a man or masculine, how to be a good citizen. Right. So we grow up trying to figure out what that means, what that looks like, what is an ideal model of a good citizen or a virtuous man. So we try to figure that out on our own. And in doing so, we don't have the time to establish, okay, well, these are the 10 precepts or 10 values or 10 virtues that make you, the man that you ought to be. So then in us transferring that information over to our kids makes it harder because we don't have that already preset, so to speak, in our own lineup. So then now we're working from behind, as it were. And then our kids suffer the void of those virtues. They suffer the void of those values being instilled. So we have to work hard to try to kind of overcome that. It's a difficult task.
Yeah, but again, and some of those values are lost because of the emotional regard. Like I said, there's a lot of times now parents are worried about hurting their child's feelings. What if he doesn't like me? What if he goes to bed mad?
Well, That, in essence, is my point. I mean, the reason why it was lost is because those parents never valued that as set presets or virtues that needed to be, come hell or high water, established in our kids.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't view them as set values. We were ready right away to say, you know what, just toss them to the side. Some parents, you talk to them and they say, hey, if my kid, you know, messes up, and I'm okay with another parent or somebody else discipline, because why? They understand the value this that comes with it, right? Whereas most other parents now are like, no, that's, they look down on that because they value the emotion over the the presets or the virtues and the values that are being established, when they quote unquote suffer those
Yeah,
difficult
the
emotional
joke
times.
used to be, and you'd see it all the time, hey, if you don't shape up, we're going to send you to military school. Nobody threatens that anymore. So yeah, part of the concept is that you have to sacrifice your own comfort for the broader sake of others, which is how armies work.
So Letty, really quick though, I mean, in some cases, some of these kids are going into the military because they've already observed in themselves the fact that they don't have the discipline that they desire, right? Mom and dad didn't give them that
Well,
instruction.
and that's what Peterson is arguing. He's saying this is how men thrive. They actually need the boundaries. They actually need the walls, and that's part of what he's arguing here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they self observe the fact that they have that void and they need to fill that somehow. So they figure, I'm going to go in the military and I'm going to get discipline one way or another because I know that discipline is good for me, right? So in the long run, I gain a lot more from that than not having that discipline. So they make this good, smart. A nephew of mine just joined the military and super disciplined already, but he knows that it's good for him. Um, that's part of the reason why some of these folks make the decisions that they do. I mean, it runs the gamut, but discipline is one of those
Well,
factors.
beyond discipline, it gives you a higher purpose for life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. On a surface level, discipline, they might look at it. Some might look at it as, hey, I need to be more disciplined. This is going to help me. And in other situations, it's more purposeful. They've already have that discipline established, but they view like, hey, you know what? My life is going to mean something, and I'm going to benefit the whole, by participating, whether it's military or something else.
And I think that's true of anyone that seeks something. What you actually find is, and Jesus said it, that there's going to be a higher, when you look beyond yourself, you serve others. The greatest is the servant of all. When you see those kinds of things, that actually does work. And that actually, because the people, look at anyone in modern music, things like that, you'll see that they ultimately find themselves unfulfilled even though they've reached the pinnacle of their careers. And it is really when they look outward to serving others, because that's really how we're built. It's just sin warps our view. That's part of the problem. Okay.
I mean, what do you find then, Lenny, would be the solution for, let's say you're the pastor of a church and you want to help the men and the young men coming up, and both present and future. You can't correct the past, unfortunately, but moving forward, how would you do that as a pastor? Nurturing that aspect of masculinity that is kind of, we're seeing there's a huge void to that, right? I guess first you would have to define what masculinity is. Is there a biblical version of masculinity? What is that? Maybe break it down into parts and then see, okay, well, how do we develop those parts?
We're discussing the recent Jordon Peterson video, Message to Christian Churches, and talking about the pros and cons of it. One of the things that I did want to bring up is an article that I saw on Christianity Today magazine that objected to this idea that we're not reaching out to young men enough, or that there are too many young men in the church. There's two facets to this that are really interesting. First of all, recent studies are showing that when you start looking through to the millennials and to the alpha generation, the young people of today, what's happening is the disparity between male and female churched people is actually disappearing. And you might think that that's a good thing. Actually, it's not a good thing. What it means is there's more women now who are leaving the church in the 18 to 22 or 18 to 25-year-old bracket than there used to be. So traditionally, when you start looking at the polling figures, even through the 20th century when we have census data and things like that, the church has always been female heavy. Women are relational. They have a little bit of extra time to serve at church, perhaps, but they're also, because they're relational, and let's face it, Christianity is a relational faith. That's how it is understood. That's how we engage. It appeals to women just naturally more so. So women have always been part of this dynamic, but that's changing now as more and more women are becoming more and more secular. We're actually losing them at a faster rate than we are men, which I think is fascinating. So one of the arguments that the author makes is that women have always been dominant in the church, even from its inception. So if you look at the 2nd and 3rd centuries, you see that Christianity was always castigated as the faith of women and slaves, right? And women made up a significant portion. It were women who were the supporters of Jesus' ministry. It was Timothy's mother and grandmother who he credits with, or who Paul credits with developing his faith, not his father in any stretch of the imagination. So women have always played not merely a pivotal role. You know, obviously Christianity appealed to women because it raised the value of women and saw them as equals. But beyond that, it also showed that women were probably one of the primary attractants to the faith. So Christianity has always been female heavy. That being said, I worry, and we'll talk about this next time in our progressive Christianity talk, about Kristen Dumez and Jesus and John Wayne, that she waves the flag of the idea of patriarchy seeping into the church. I just don't think that's true. But there's something to be thought about, that women would naturally make up the bulk of the church simply because of who women are and how our relational faith is put out. I think there's some truth to that. I don't think that negates the idea of we need to reach out to the men. It just means to say that we need to reach out to the men more, right? If you're a diabetic and you naturally don't produce enough insulin, then you take insulin. So if as a church we naturally attract women, well then great, that's the easy point. Then that means you have to focus and work to attract men. But that's part of the criticism that I think we have to be careful of, is to not assume that we're, like I said, it's not that we're ignoring men. And Peterson does make a critique saying that the Protestant churches are the worst in reaching out and doing these kinds of things. But be that as it may, it's what the church has always done. Now, is his prescription appropriate for church? Our primary goal isn't to capture men so that we don't lose our cultural understanding. Our primary goal in the church is not to save culture. Our primary goal in the church is to save individuals. Cultural change comes as a response or as a result to that. So you may plant a tree because you need shade. Now, if that tree also produces fruit, then that's great. Or you may wish to plant trees because you want lemons and you want oranges, and its primary goal is to produce fruit. If it also gives you shade in the backyard, that's helpful. It's a natural outgrowth. If the tree is doing well, if you want it to produce fruit, the tree has to thrive. And when it thrives, it tends to grow bigger and it tends to provide more shade, right? It's one follows the other. But the goal isn't necessarily, when you're planting lemons and orange trees, to create a lot of shade. You can plant other trees in other ways for that. The whole goal is to produce fruit. So I think in the Christian church, we have to be a little bit careful in nuancing these things, because we want to capture individuals in order to make sure that they are part of God's kingdom, that they are saved from the sin that besets each one of us. If that's true, virtue will follow, right? If you love one another, they will know you're my disciples. So I think that we have to be careful in these messages not to get the cart before the horse and focus so much on the problems in society. Society's sinful. It will always be sinful. I mean, Paul was dealing with Nero, and they were burning Christians in his garden in order to light his way. Your target isn't to save society. Your target is to save individuals to the kingdom, and society comes as a part of that in some ways, but society will always be fallen. Anytime you have flawed individuals, you're going to have a fallen society, and Christianity will always be the narrow way. It'll never be the broad way. So I think those are some issues that we have to caution ourselves against when we start looking at some of the things that Peterson is saying. It's easy because we get charged up, right, Don? We get engaged because we see how bad it is. And when someone comes alongside us and says, yes, it's that bad, we say, okay, great. I'm glad you're on the same page with me. And, and everybody's an ally in the foxhole with you. And the Christian church has been doing this. And for example, in the critical social justice movement, you're seeing people aligning themselves with atheists now, taking on to those kinds of issues where we say James Lindsay is one of the more popular figures there. Now, I agree that his book, Critical Theories, was important because it did expose things. But prior to 2015, James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian and those guys, part of their goal was to go on to college campuses and have debates with Christians to try and dissuade other people to become Christians. And what he found was that the only people who were actually interested in even arguing about whether things were true were the Christians. So he said, we have a bigger problem. We've got a common enemy. And therefore, we need to go after this, which, again, I don't decry people from reading James Lindsay. I've recommended his book in the past to people. I do think that his polemics are sometimes off the charts. I wouldn't necessarily recommend approaching the problem socially the way he does on social media. I don't think that's true. But realize he's still secular. He's still an atheist. And so it's important to stand against evil, and if others are standing against evil, we can stand with them. But that doesn't mean that that's the focus of what we should be doing. We're not called to target the social issues first. We're called to target the hard issues first. The social issues, I think, follow from that.
I see what you're saying, Lenny. If I may, I don't know if I'd be really challenging much of what you're saying or not, but So the primary focus of Christianity is to save souls, right? And then the secondary, it sounds like, effects of that would be a culture a beneficial culture that kind of comes as a product of that. What if I were to say, argue the opposite, or not the opposite, but say, why can't you have both and? So in the same way that when the Lord provides rain, so to speak, and it falls both on the believer's property and the non-believer's property, both benefit from that.
Oh, right? I think you can, but if you're a sharpshooter, the scope can only target one point.
Yeah, but who's to say you have to be a sharpshooter? Maybe the purpose of the church is more than just saving souls. I mean, it's saving souls is a primary, like you said, but why can't you have both ends?
Well, okay.
Why can't the church be a cornerstone, as it were, for society as a whole, and then everybody benefits
and
from
it can.
precepts?
Again, it can. So let me see if I can clarify my point a little bit. The Salvation Army started in the mid-1800s with William Booth, who wanted to minister to the people that he saw suffering. And he knew that the primary way to get people out of the trap of drugs, of alcohol, of gambling, those sinful behaviors was the cross. And so he also said, I wanted to look around for the most efficient way to organize my system, and the most organized system I could find was the British Army. So that's why he developed the Salvation Army. His approach was soup, soap, and salvation. A man can't hear the gospel until, he doesn't have to worry about where his next meal is coming from, right? It's hard to receive the gospel on an empty stomach, basically. And so we want to comfort human beings because human beings are made in the image of God, and there's an inherent good in and of itself in comforting a human being. Whether that person's going to respond to the gospel or not, there's an inherent comfort in comfort, and there's an inherent good, I should say, in comforting that human being. We go out, we give water to the homeless on a hot day, not because we're just trying to proselytize them. We're really, the goal in that one act is to alleviate human suffering. But in general, we alleviate human suffering because it's one of the ways that we reflect the love of God, that we reflect the love of Christ. And primarily what we're trying to do is to be faithful to the calling to love one another, so that they may know him by seeing the love that we share. What concerns me and again, we got to talk about the progressive Christianity, which will be our next podcast. But what concerns me is one of the aspects of progressive Christianity and some of the liberal denominations of the mid 20th century as well, is they got the social order backwards. They got more involved in loving your fellow man than loving God. And the loving God part started falling away. It drifted away to where social justice became the primary motivator to these organizations. When that happened, are they churches anymore, or are they just nonprofits that are helping others? And so while we can do both, and sometimes we serve people out of our understanding that they are people made in the image of God, and they deserve to have they shouldn't suffer. They deserve to have some type of comfort. And even chaplains do this when you're talking with people of other faiths, right? You want to give somebody comfort if you're in the hospital, things like that. It's not about, will you accept Jesus today? That would be actually a breach of your duties. But if you don't understand that the main thing is honoring God and then loving your fellow man, then you can drift into even heresy, I think.
I guess part of my reason for bringing it up is because I've been working this out a little bit intellectually for myself, trying to kind of shape my own views on this. And part of me wants to get the idea as to, there's a responsibility on the Christians from a Christian standpoint, that all that we do, we're to do it as unto the Lord, right? So whether it's my work, whether it's raising my family, whether it's participating in politics, or everything that I do, my goal, my aim is to glorify God in all that I do. And by glorifying God in all that I do, I know that I'm also glorifying God by benefiting my neighbor, right? When I love my neighbor as I love myself. In the same sense, I feel that by ignoring the cultural aspect of our duties, we're getting imbalanced, as it were, as Christians. And I think that we are tasked to maintain a good culture, because it benefits our neighbor as it benefits ourselves, right?
Well, okay, so is there a difference, though, between maintaining a good culture and realize, I'm not saying you abdicate it. I'm not saying that you don't push for it. You should.
No, I do understand that. I know, but it just seems like we lean the other direction and we kind of neglect the cultural aspect of things to a degree. And my my reason for bringing it up is I don't want to neglect that. I want to bless others, whether they know it or not. They're getting blessed by God's principles. When scientists make discoveries, their discoveries are either objective truth or subjective truths, right? And if they're objective truths, then we can look at those truths together and observe and make sure that, hey, yeah, that finding or that discovery you made is legitimate or not. We're working on a Christian worldview. We're borrowing from the Christian worldview in order to survive and to live. And when we communicate that to our culture and share with them and say, hey, the reason why you're benefiting, you're being blessed, and you're progressing, as the true term of progression, not this progression regression renamed as progressive. When you progress, when these positive things are occurring, they're occurring because you're working off of a Christian worldview, unbeknownst to yourself. We're not communicating that to people. People are living and they're benefiting from life, Christian principles, so to speak, and they're taking from that, but they don't know that they're taking from that. They don't know that they're working off of a Christian worldview and reaping the benefits of it. And we're not communicating that. And in my view is our goal, just as God had tasked Adam to take care of the garden, we're supposed to do the same. I have this concept where when sin continues to progress, in part we're failing as a church because we're allowing a culture to exist that is allowing for our sinful nature to thrive, as opposed to influencing and affecting our culture so that it goes the opposite direction.
So that's true that's true to an extent. We should always be an inhibitor of sin. We should always be the thing, the spirit in the working through the church is the thing that is the it pushes it thwarts sin as much as it possibly can. There are points where it can go too far. For example, the debacle of prohibition is one example where the church hoped to do something, but without a change of heart, it actually made the problem worse, not better. It empowered those who were selling alcohol underground and things like that. And ultimately, the amendment for prohibition had to be repealed because it not only didn't work, it didn't work spectacularly and really failed. While I understand the motivation, I mean, people saw alcohol as being a sin. Let's just take away the alcohol and then people won't become alcoholics. That didn't work. It was a heart issue again. So they aimed at that. They succeeded at changing the culture in the sense of there was enough individuals in enough states to say, yes, alcohol is a bane on our society, to pass an amendment to the Constitution. That's a big deal. And that took a lot of political clout and a lot of political sway. At the same time, we had to turn around and repeal it because it didn't ultimately achieve the desired goal, which has to be heart-driven as opposed to external-driven. At the same, but that doesn't mean that we don't try and overturn a Roe versus Wade, because or push for a Proposition 8 in the state of California where you start to define marriage between a man and a woman. Those kinds of issues, that's a little different. That's one of the reasons why that's different is because in those cases, we're trying to keep the standard status quo as opposed to try and move people out of the standard. Alcohol has been around forever. It's a socially acceptable form of function, things like that. You're not going to take it away.
Part of the reason why I wanted to bring that up was I didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I didn't want to exclude the duty and the calling that the Christian has to promote a good culture.
Yeah.
Because again, all that we do it as unto the
Right.
Lord, right? And then in the same sense, and as a side note, I think we kind of can potentially, if judgment is to come, and it will at some point, we can, in my view, deter or prevent that judgment from coming sooner by implementing and by living lives that are and promoting a culture that are beneficial, that are good. And my reason for mentioning that is because in Scripture there's this concept of the cup of trembling, right? And as this cup fills, as sin continues and progresses, and the decline continues and gets worse and worse, then that cup, in the way I picture it in my cartoon mind, continues to fill and fill and fill. But if there were things that were implemented or put into place that helped culture go the opposite direction, and that more people started coming to know the Lord through these benefits. So by us influencing culture, in essence, we delay judgment, as it were. And this is a concept I was kind of trying to understand and put the pieces of the puzzle together and try to make sense from a holistic standpoint of how this works. I'm starting to kind of view things to where I sense that judgment is directly related to our sinful state, right? In the same sense that Jonah, he went out and wanted to declare judgment on the Ninevites, but he knew that God is merciful, and if they repent, then God would grant them that mercy. And he did it unwillingly. He didn't want to see them be able to reap the benefits, as it were, of a repentant state. So the king states, okay, we're all turning to God. Repentance occurs. God prevents the judgment from coming. And Jonah's left upset and frustrated because the Ninevites were so wicked and evil that in his guesstimation, they deserved the judgment that they were going to get. In the same sense, so you had what I would call a leader, a political leader, if you will, shift the whole culture to a positive direction because they were applying positive principles, right? And in a similar sense, but getting an opposite effect is Gomorrah. You have Lot's, if I remember right, Lot was a city. He stood at
Sodom,
the city gates, which kind of implies that he was a leader in Sodom, and because he didn't have the influence, in my opinion, that he should have been able to obtain and promote, that culture did get judged, and that cup of trembling, so to speak, got full to the point where it overflowed and judgment came. When judgment comes, I feel like it's going to be directly related to our actions or inactions and our leaders' abilities to either promote a positive or a negative environment that will either speed up, increase in speed, or decrease in speed the point at which judgment does.
Well, that may be true.
Sense?
The distinction, of course, is with Nineveh. It was a message of repentance, and repentance was engaged by the people. They actually did. Now that didn't stick because Nineveh was ultimately judged. The Assyrians were conquered by the Babylonians. You knew that,
right? It was delayed.
It was delayed, and so yes, we can see that. But then Sodom, they were of course Lot was so problematic that even his family wouldn't believe him when he was trying to testify to them. He was compromised, and I think God, the first message was you should have been out of here a long time ago. If you capitulate to the norms of a wicked society, then what will happen is ultimately your witness itself becomes corrupted, and you could lose your family as a result. So there is a point in time where you have to say, we can no longer, we can talk about it, we can preach repentance, we can try and make a stand, but if the culture is so overwhelmingly wicked, we have to then not necessarily participate in a lot of the things of that culture. We have to remove ourselves in some sense from it. I'm not saying we have to be
right. We're in it, but not of it, right?
So now, too many Christians have used that as an excuse to enter into their holy huddle and think that they're okay. You can't do that. You have to, right? You don't know the political support you're doing by when you buy your next pair of pants. Which store are you shopping at? Are they supporting Planned Parenthood? Are they giving to the organizations that you decry? At some point in time, you just say, all I want is a pair of pants. I don't want to have to check at the political, and if everybody's doing it, then, look at June Pride Month. Yeah. Pick a brand that doesn't support June Pride Month. I dare you find one, and so you get that, the point where you're just stuck with it. But that doesn't mean that you have to just capitulate to it and just go with it. That's a different question. In all of this. Coming back to Jordon Peterson, lastly, though, he ends this video something interesting. He says, ask more, not less, of those you are inviting. Ask more of them than anyone ever has. Remind them of who they are in the deepest sense and help them become that. So I can understand that. I think that's a positive message. But then he says, your church is, for God's sake, quit fighting for social justice. Quit saving the bloody planet. Attend to some souls. That's what you're supposed to do. That's your holy duty. And it's like, wow, that's pretty brazen. Quit fighting for social justice. Well, again, I hear what he's saying. I think he's using the term social justice in this modern critical social justice context. But Christianity has always upheld the downtrodden. We have to be a little bit careful in nuanced, I think, in some of that, because some of the social justices, the abortion issue is primary in my mind, but there are other issues that we can talk about. Feeding the homeless is one of those. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, again, the homeless bear some responsibility in themselves. They need to pick these things up. But regardless, there will always be that aspect of the church. However, I do think that it is primary that we try to reach out and save souls and engage these people. And ultimately, the thing I liked about the video was it underscored, here's a mission field that nobody's really talking about, young men. And here's one way to approach that mission field. Engage them with their higher calling, with their purpose. Tell them they're valuable, something that we don't hear a lot. Men, you are valuable and you need to be engaging. Nobody can do some of the things that the church needs done except young men. Young men are capable of doing things that nobody else in the world are doing. And we need more of them. Just simple as that. If you can get that message across, you may actually be able to reach a lot of people. It may be something that's attractive, not because it's the latest marketing ploy, but because it appeals to that aspect of the image of God, of the imago Dei they bear in themselves, that helps them understand a little bit more who they are. If part of the image of God is the idea of love in the sense of helping others before self, if that's the aspect of love that we're trying to inculcate in people, then that should be part of our message, and it can be an attractive message to a generation of young men who never hear it in any other way. So I think that's true.
I think if the church doesn't step in and participate in this, men will go wayward. There will be no, um, I don't want to say defined, but there will be no structure for men to follow to see what it is to be have a godly model of what it means to be a man. I mean, that void of information, that void of instruction, that void of discipline. Um, I think he nails it on the head. He says there's a void there, and it's our it's our job, just like it is to preach the gospel, save souls. We have to nurture, build, and mold, and shape. That's what discipling
Discipleship.
is,
Yeah,
right?
it's not
Right.
conversion only, it's
Right.
discipleship. Absolutely.
Now, I mean, that's part of the body's responsibilities and duties as well. Um, yeah, we're going to run into a bunch of different obstacles in the way, and we're going to have to figure out what's appropriate and how to get past those obstacles and what the appropriate ways to do so. Um, but it's definitely, this is just the tip of the iceberg, as it were.
Okay. Well, that's quite a bit for this time. I'm sure we'll have more to say as we think through things. But thanks so much for taking the time, Dom. Love to talk with you again.
I appreciate it.
If you've
Likewise.
enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends. You can also listen on Spotify, iTunes, or any of your favorite audio versions for this podcast. And hopefully we'll be talking with you more next week. This is Lenny Esposito for Come Reason Ministries, and we'll see you then. Thank you for watching this Come Reason video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos like these, consider subscribing to our Come Reason YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button. And you can follow us on social media. Lastly, if you'd like to help keep these kinds of videos free, consider providing a donation by clicking on the donation button beside me. Thank you.